"What's the Layers?" I queried. "What's the mountain glide?" "Layers Lane leads up to the Layers," replied Roy. "There's an old abandoned sand and gravel quarry up there, all overgrown. The mountain glide is a track down into the quarry. It's great for kart racing. Anyway, you'll see." Brian came back, towing his cart by its bridle. It was a bit bigger than mine, with much higher sides. "This is Larkspur. She's only a heavy transport model, but pretty fast all the same. Where's your sprinter, Roy?" By way of answer, Roy reached under the hen house at our side and pulled out what was little more than a short plank with 4 wheels. It was painted bright red. "Here she is. Let's go and see if there's anyone out on the meadow who wants to come too." We went out of his gate into Lyons Avenue and turned right to discover an open space on our left. It looked like a builder's lot for about 5 houses, doubtless abandoned at the outbreak of the war. Several children were running around playing touch. They stopped when we appeared and clustered around Roy, looking at me curiously. I recognized Katie. She smiled at me and said, "I know him already. He's in my class." "Hi, Katie," I said. "Stepped on any fat slugs lately?" "Anyone coming up the Layers?" asked Roy. He didn't waste time with introductions. He knew that they were all aware that a newcomer had arrived and that we would certainly get quickly acquainted one way or another. "How about you, Dismal?" asked Roy. The boy he spoke to looked ruefully up and replied, "I can't. My aunt's coming for tea, and I've got to go home in half an hour." "Reenie?" asked Roy. The girl addressed was big, must have been 16 or 17. She shook her head. "Got to stay in the meadow. My mum's going out soon, and I've got to look after Wiki." "I can come," volunteered a small, lively-looking boy about my age, "but my cart's busted like a bankrupt broker." "Never mind about your cart, Tommy," said Roy. "You can share ours. We'll pull you up to the Layers in Larkspur." I looked curiously at Tommy. He wore a kind of metal frame on each leg. I'd never seen the like before. He noticed my curiosity and said laconically, "Poliomyelitis." He grinned. "Or poliomyitis." I grinned back appreciatively at his play on the word. The others took no notice. They'd probably heard it many times before. "Anyone else?" said Roy, looking around the group. "Lita?" He looked at a pretty, cheerful girl, slightly older than me. "Okay," she said doubtfully after a pause. "But I can't stay long. My mother wants me home early. I'll help pull Tommy." "I suppose you can't come, Katie?" asked Roy. Katie slowly shook her long braid. "I'd love to come, but you know my mum won't let me out of the avenue." "It's only up the Layers," pleaded Roy, "and you'd be with us. Couldn't you ask her again?" Katie shook her head once more. "It wouldn't work. The Layers are out of bounds for me. It's okay. I'll stay here with Reenie and Dismal. The Merryweather girls will probably be allowed out soon, as it's Saturday and the sun's shining." We set off up Layers Lane, the carts bumping and rattling over the gravelly ruts. Roy took the lead, and I walked alongside him. "Is Dismal his real name?" I asked, thinking it must be sad to have such a depressing name. Roy laughed. "His real name is Dennis Kimball, but he always sees the gloomy side of things, so we call him Dismal Dennis, or just Dismal for short. He doesn't mind. Cheers him up, he says." "And who's Wiki?" "She's Reenie's little sister," replied Roy. "She's only 5. She gets in the way all the time and asks endless questions. She gets on everyone's wick. That's why she's called Wiki. You'll see," he added ominously. After 5 minutes, the lane became less steep and ended abruptly at the entrance to a house with some outbuildings. From the latter came a musical clinking sound. "Sounds like a lot of bottles being washed." "Right you are," said Roy. "That's where Dismal lives. His dad's the milkman. He's got a big machine for washing the bottles." "I wouldn't have expected to find that at the top of this bumpy lane," I remarked. Tommy caught this and said, "Ha, like that, he needn't buy a churner. He sets off each morning with a load of milk, but reaches the end of the lane with a lorry full of butter." From Dismal's house the lane dwindled to a narrow footpath. We had to go in single file across wild wasteland, overgrown with ferns, bushes and brambles, with a few young trees here and there. After several minutes, Roy, in the lead, held up his hand, palm forward. "Stop," he commanded. "We're here." I dropped the reins of Lightning, stepped up to his shoulder, and peered down a steep slope into a crescent-shaped pit. At the bottom, the gradient gradually flattened out to end at the edge of a pool surrounded by scattered bushes. There were some half-ruined sheds nearby. "That's the mountain glide," announced Roy. I was filled with apprehension. The idea of hurtling down there on Lightning seemed suicidal to me. "It's very steep," I commented. Roy made light of it. "It's not as steep as all that. It just seems so at first. You'll soon get used to it." I didn't feel reassured. His last statement seemed unlikely to me. Roy must have felt my hesitation. "You'd better not try going straight down first go, not with a new cart, especially with those little wheels at the front. Take it gently at first, so you can feel her out and see how she handles. If you take the slope at an angle, you can control your speed by steering upwards or downwards as necessary. Don't turn upwards too sharply, mind, particularly if you're sitting up. If you do, you'll turn right over. Lying down is better, but you go faster. I'll show you. Just follow me. I'll go slowly at first." He placed Sprinter across the slope, got aboard in a sitting position, placed one foot on the steering bar and the other on the ground. I did the same on Lightning, just to his rear. He glanced behind. "All set?" "All set," I replied, with the confidence I was far from feeling. "Here we go, then. Just let her roll. If you feel she's going too fast or is becoming unstable, just steer a little upslope and you'll slow down." He took his foot off the ground and placed it on the other side of the steering bar. I did the same, and we began to roll. Gradually we picked up speed. Roy turned slightly upslope. I followed, and we slowed a little. He turned downslope, with me just behind, and our speed increased. It was easy. Nothing to it. I felt my confidence grow and turned even more downslope. I was now slightly below Roy and gaining on him. "Geronimo!" I yelled as I drew level and turned even more downslope. The wind began whistling past my ears. "This is great!" I shouted. "Slow down!" cautioned Roy as I began to overtake him. "That's a new crate you're riding, and you don't know yet how she handles." I wasn't listening. Euphoria had taken over. I rashly turned even more downslope. My speed increased. Suddenly the left front wheel struck a pebble, and Lightning swerved slightly in that direction. I corrected with a push from the foot on that side, but I had overcorrected and began to swerve to the right. I overcorrected the swerve and swung to the left. The left-right pendulum movement gained in amplitude and became a high-speed wobble. I tried desperately to slow down by turning left upslope, but I overdid the manoeuvre. Lightning lurched violently to the left and went alarmingly up onto her two right-hand wheels to roll completely over, throwing me off in the process. Lightning and I slithered together for some yards downhill, almost to the bottom, then came to rest in a cloud of dust under a bramble bush. Roy slid to a halt just alongside. "Are you all right?" he asked anxiously. "Dunno. Give me a second to find out." I lay there a moment, taking inventory of my various limbs and bodily parts. Everything seemed to be there, but I had a pain in my side where the lump was. Other than that, all appeared to be in order. "I'm okay, I think," I said to Roy. "Just let me push myself out from under these brambles and I'll tell you for sure." I rolled carefully onto my back and pushed myself along the ground with my feet until I was clear of the brambles. I then sat up to examine my exposed parts more thoroughly. Both knees and both elbows were bleeding slightly, but that was nothing serious, just grazes. I was used to that. The pain in my side was something else, though. It hurt again, like on the first day, but I didn't want Roy to notice. It might make him feel bad about bringing me here. He was busy setting Lightning back on her wheels. "Any damage?" I asked. "Don't think so, but that was a nasty wobble you got into. I think the steering bar is too loose. We'd better tighten it up before you have another go." At this moment, Brian, Tommy, and Lita arrived, riding 3 up in Larkspur. "Are you okay?" cried Lita anxiously. "Oh, look at your knees and elbows. You must get them cleaned and covered up. You'd better go right home and get your mother to do it." "She's not my mother. She's my aunt, and I'm not going home until I have to." "Well then, you'd better come home with me. I'll do it," responded Lita. "I've got to be home shortly anyway. The others can stay here if they want to." This sounded to my ears a much more attractive proposition. "Okay, I'd like that. But how do we get back up the mountain glide with the carts?" Roy took over. "We've got a system, not least because Tommy, with his irons, finds it hard to climb up. Just watch." He took the reins of Lightning and tied them to the back axle of Sprinter. Then he tied the reins of Larkspur to the back axle of Lightning, making a train of the 3 carts. "Okay, Tommy, hop into Larkspur. We 4 will pull you." I looked up the steep mountain glide and wondered how, even with 4 of us pulling, we could ever get the 3 carts and Tommy to the top. Roy saw my perplexity. "Don't worry," he laughed. "We're not going that way." He pointed to the left. "There's a path over there behind those bushes that zigzags up. It was probably made for the lorries to get into and out of the pit, and we can easily get Tommy back up." I was glad of that, for with my rib I was not able to do my fair share of the pulling. After a few minutes we arrived at the top. From here it was gently downhill all the way back to the meadow. "Right then," said Roy. "See you 2 again soon." "Till soon," Lita and I echoed. "Leave Lightning at my place as you go by," advised Roy. "I'll tighten up the steering." He leapt onto Sprinter and disappeared head first down the mountain glide. He was quickly followed by Brian and Tommy riding tandem in Larkspur. I got into Lightning. "Come on, Lita. You can ride in front." "Are you sure it's all right?" she asked nervously. "Sure, I'm sure. It was a high-speed wobble on a steep hill. It's just a slow, gentle slope back to the meadow. Get in." Lita sat carefully in front of me and gathered her skirts off the ground to hold them between her knees. She leaned back softly against me as I pushed gently off down the hill. I felt the delicious warmth of her shoulders against my chest and became filled with a strange ease. It comforted my painful ribs. The ride back could not be slow enough for me. Renee and Katie were on the meadow as we went by. With them was a very small girl and 2 slightly bigger ones, as alike as Tweedledum and Tweedledee. There was no sign of Dismal. Renee and Katie waved, but they didn't move to come over, and we didn't stop. "The little girl is Wiki," said Lita. "The other 2 are the Merriweather twins, Jill and Susan." "How can you tell them apart?" "Apart I can't, but when they're together, which is most of the time, I can tell Jill from Susan because Jill's chickenpox scar is slightly higher above her left eye than Susan's." Lita and I left Lightning by Roy's shed, and then we crossed the road to her house, which was nearly opposite. Lita introduced me to her mother. The 2 of them clucked and fussed over my grazed elbows and knees like 2 broody hens over their chicks. They washed my 4 dusty, blooded joints, covered them literally with stinging iodine and soothing words, protected them thoroughly with sticking plaster and motherly incantations, and set me gently outside the door facing Lyons Avenue. They then had to prepare to go out themselves. I was sauntering down their front path towards the gate, wondering what to do next, when my aunt appeared on her bicycle. It was loaded like a llama with bags and panniers. There was a huge parcel tied with string on the carrier behind the saddle. She skidded to a stop by the gate and looked at me suspiciously. "What were you doing at the Hardwicks? I thought I left you with Mrs. Rumble." She sucked in her breath as she spotted my patched-up joints. "What mischief have you been up to, you terrible child? I hope you haven't been fighting." I thought it judicious not to say anything about my scrap with Brian. I tried to pass my injuries off lightly. "I just had a little accident, that's all." "An accident?" almost shrieked my aunt. "Just like you to have an accident. Can't you be more careful?" I considered this last question to be of a rhetorical nature, so I didn't reply. It was a mistake. "So, tell me," demanded my aunt, "what kind of stupidity have you been committing now?" "I was going fast and I fell over," I explained, without exactly lying. "Just like you not to look where you're going," was her rejoinder. Fortunately, she didn't insist on being supplied with details. "And look at your clothes! Simply filthy! Can't you be more careful? Just as well this parcel has arrived. It's some clothes your cousin John has grown out of." "Cousin John? I didn't know I had a cousin John." "Don't be more stupid than you can help. He's your Uncle Percy's son. He's a year older than you." I didn't risk telling her that I was ignorant of the fact that an Uncle Percy was hanging somewhere on my family tree. As far as I was aware, the only living relative I possessed was my father's sister, here, in front of me, on her bicycle. "Stop gawping like that, and come on in now," she commanded. "Help me unpack the shopping. Next Saturday you'll be doing it on your own. You can use your cart. I'm going to have a little holiday. Here, carry this bag for me.